I must apologize because we were wrong about Monkey D. Dragon. We just seen him tell his father, I am going to quit the Navy, as Garp doesn't fight back, knowing Dragon's decision could truly not be argued as a young Marine who has potential to make change. And Monkey D. Dragon also lets his father, Monkey D. Garp, know he despises him, which Garp does accept because unlike Ace and Luffy, Dragon did follow Garp's footsteps, only to be led astray as the top brass monster actions were revealed on God Valley. In my opinion, Garp knew his son was going to become the greatest Marine, but didn't mind seeing that the potential is going to go against that black monster known as Nerona Emu. So today, I am not doing a deep dive on Luffy's father, but rather a deep dive on Garp's son. And as always, if you're enjoying the content, make sure you guys turn on notification and subscribe to the channel as we're so close to 100k subscribers. When God Valley was destroyed, it was said there was a short silence and then a massive lightning bolt, which made me think of Lelouch Kingdom and how Vegapunk's message of the One Piece world is in danger of being underwater. But seeing Dragon stare up at the sky reminded me of the massive lightning bolt that saved Luffy from Buggy, executing him during Loguetown. Now we know Dragon was there and there was a sudden rain that wet the Marines' gunpowder. And Smoker couldn't believe this was all a coincidence. Me personally, I'm not saying these two lightning bolts were caused by Dragon, but I must admit, I do find it interesting since I definitely believe the Loguetown lightning bolt was caused by Luffy's father. Now, enough of the random Dragon theories. Let's start off with Dragon's introduction on Loguetown, the final East Blue Island. And now there are some important East Blue characters like Mihawk and Shanks, but I believe Dragon is the most important East Blue character other than the Straw Hat Pirates. And I apologize, Buggy fans, but hear me out. Now, obviously, I'm highlighting the East Blue saga, and Roger doesn't count because he was killed in the first chapter. But speaking of Roger, he is tied into Dragon's introduction as we see the statement from Roger that says inherited will, the destiny of an age, and the dreams of its people. As long as these people continue to pursue the meaning of freedom, these things will never cease to be. Now don't forget, Dragon was at Loguetown for the execution of Roger, his father's biggest rival, and the main player at God Valley. And for Dragon to say Luffy a pirate, that's fine too. That to me shows the respect he had for Goldie Roger and Davy D. Rocks, as they stood against the world government just like him, and unlike his father Garp, who he despised for being a Marine. Now, I also believe Dragon did not only quit because of the Celestial Dragon murder game being aided by the Marines, but also their boss Nerona Emu, who was also present at God Valley. And when Whitebeard asked Rocks what was in front of them, Rocks replied, the world. The same thing Dragon said after saving Luffy from Smoker, the world awaits our answer. This is obvious foreshadowing by Ichiro Oda to Dragon trying to kill the king of the world, Emu. Now, Loguetown also had 3 other epic Dragon moments, from his manipulation the wind causing Luffy to escape Smoker's grasp. He also said, go on then, is that your desire? A stark contrast from his father Garp, who tried to forcefully make Luffy a Marine. And then there's Smoker. Yes, when Smoker asked Dragon why did he help Luffy, he simply answered, what reason do you have for preventing a man from setting sail? Dragon is blurring the lines from Marine and pirate to good and evil, flipping the world upside down. This is all inspired from God Valley. And take a closer look who he is telling this to. It's Smoker, who not only yelled at the top brass for giving him the crocodile win the same way Garp did after the Rocks win was given to him, but also the same Smoker who respected Furutora, who kneeled to Riku for forgiveness in front of the world so he couldn't take the Doflamingo win. And lastly, the same Smoker who lost his best friend to the underworld and Blackbeard pirates. Yes, Aokiji, who might I add is a former Garp pupil, just like Dragon. Listen, I'm not saying Smoker will end up in the Revolutionary Army, but I do believe everything is being tied all together in this final saga, where Dragon finally makes his big move as the Holy Land starves and burns to flames. After Eni's lobby, Garp reveals the Yonko of Shanks, Kaido, Big Mom, and Whitebeard, all pirates who were present on God Valley. We also see Kobe meet Luffy again, who, like I said, reminds me of the Dragon we saw on God Valley, that 17-year-old young Marine. And lastly, Garp reveals Luffy met his father at Loguetown. So yeah, post Eni lobby had a lot of interesting things, especially this chapter centered around Dragon. Now, I'll say this, Garp was surprised that Dragon didn't introduce himself as he announces to the Marines and Straw Hat Pirates that Luffy's father is the revolutionary Monkey D. Dragon. I believe either two things happened. Smoker told Aokiji, who would then later tell Garp, or Garp and Dragon directly spoke, which from translations from Sandman it is hinted at. Also, for the people who doubt Dragon's aura, look at the reaction of Frankie, Sanji, and Nami to Dragon compared to the Yonko. They knew Dragon's name, the most wanted man in the One Piece world. Nico Robin reveals to Luffy how Monkey D. Dragon is going directly against the world government and changing the world while also being super mysterious until Garp just dropped this huge bombshell by accident. I also want to mention how during Dragon's introduction, one of his men is trying to explain the lore of Monkey D. Luffy and how he's related to Garp, but Dragon leaves to the balcony and begins staring off to the east. As he speaks to Luffy, telling him to live the life he wants and to also use every possible chance and determination to question the world. Now this could be taken at the literal sense, but I also believe this is a reference to Immu, and how Dragon is pretty much saying that the time they eventually meet will be in front of Immu, where unlike God Valley, Garp and Dragon, father and son, had a huge gap in power scaling. In the final saga, Luffy will be relative to Dragon as they try to take down Nerona, the world, Immu. Might I also add, this same chapter is when Ace and Blackbeard also fight. Yes, the son of two men who also try to question the world in a sense on God Valley. Yes, Rox and Roger fought Immu. If you want to know how important Dragon is, just look after the Marineford War what happened. Yes, where Robin is asked to meet with Dragon by the revolutionaries at Tequila Bridge. Mind you, this bridge is built because of Immu's big war, the fear that Vegapunk revealed that's about to happen to the One Piece world. Or look at Sanji being with Ivankov and being trained by both Dragon and Luffy's ally. Then there's Dragon saying his family ties have made his soldiers happy. Their mysterious boss is human. If anything, it's like Dragon was doing things the opposite way of Immu, who's still a mystery to the Marines. Lastly, Dragon saying Luffy is an adult to why this reveal doesn't matter makes me remember Kuma's flashback when he found out Luffy as a boy training was Dragon's son and brought it up to Dragon, who said a child is a parent's weak spot, so watch your words. So now the fact that Luffy is grown, he will go from Dragon's weak spot to actual strength when fighting the world Immu. Yes, the Yonko and the world's most wanted man side by side. It was cool to see Dragon acknowledge the death of Whitebeard, bringing a huge change to the One Piece world, as this made me remember Whitebeard saving Dragon as a boy on God Valley, who's another man he respects more than Garp, who he despises. Like all the legends from back in the days that he actually respects, those are guys from Garp's era. I also want to mention seeing Immu destroy Lelouch while Sabo is mentioning the empty throne, with Dragon listening on the Den Den Mushi, already witnessing God Valley be destroyed, could be potentially a reference to the same weapon being used because of that lightning bolt, but I doubt it. During Egghead Island, Vegapunk said the same thing to Dragon that Harold said to Rox about the world government being a huge organization and there being decent people in it, especially the Navy. What I notice is Dragon's response is a little different to Rox, where Dragon says he gets it but can't sit back after the O'Hara incident, showing him being a part of the Marines changes his perspective from Rox. Dragon is so motivated from the O'Hara incident, he turns his freedom fighters to revolutionary army that is good enough to take on the world government head on. Dragon also promises to change the world even though he knows Immu is the world, and Vegapunk reminds Dragon on how much he hates war, unlike Garp and Luffy who love combat. I always felt like Dragon was different from his father and his son. He, in my opinion, is less selfish than his father and son, but this will lead to him having a big crash out moment in the final saga for someone else, probably like Luffy or his adoptive son Sabo. Also, them being brothers before even Dragon met Sabo makes it all the better. Growing up, I always remember a famous quote that says, "Be a kid and always ask questions to learn more information." That's all Dragon was doing on God Valley when I first read this flashback, as his superiors were getting frustrated as they probably knew the truth that this wasn't a training exercise, but instead a cruel competition for the Celestial Dragons, as Dragon shot 2 civilians with tranquilizer and also witnessed sleeping gas be used on the civilians of God Valley. Kind of remind me of Zoe and the Minx. You can't really blame Dragon for feeling guilty for taking part in this madness and eventually leaving the Marines. Oda would later have Dragon be asked to take care of the children that belong to one of the most evil celestial dragons, Garling, father of Shanks. And the funny thing is that the main prize on God Valley was the Davy clan, whose ancestors was Davy D. Jones and his dream, which many believe started the Will of D, and brought fear to Imu alongside Joy Boy. Also, remember how Blackbeard attacked Baltigo where Dragon was located and Shanks stole the Nika fruit that Dragon's son would eventually eat? These two will forever be connected to Monkey D. Dragon, Shanks, and Blackbeard because of the God Valley incident. So in a sense, Dragon had a lot of influence in the One Piece world and how it's shaped today. Talk about Dragon being a revolutionary to the T. Some might even argue that Dragon brought more change and revolution as a Marine than a Revolutionary Army member. I would disagree, but I get why they would say that because of the God Valley incident. I understand why they would have that sentiment. We then see Dragon run from Shanks' mother because he didn't want to be around her unless he was helping and he knew that he wasn't going to help. We see a very interesting scene where Dragon is almost puking from seeing all the dead bodies. Yes, he's literally gagging. And he also is feeling fear of the Celestial Dragon's wrath against his platoon if he does help Shanks and Shamrock. We then see him happy that Ivankov and Kuma still have hope. Funny thing is, these same men would shape his future army as he kills the Celestial Dragon about to kill the Buccaneer Kuma, hypothetically giving him 10 kills. Yes, that Celestial Dragon, if he killed Kuma, would have had 10 kills in a row. That is crazy, and I don't blame you, Dragon, for killing this guy. As Dragon goes back to save Shanks and Shamrock, the twins, and is shocked they are not crying, seeing how cold the Celestial Dragons are at birth. But I also believe Shanks' mother was a Davy clan member, making Shanks half a Will of D and half a Celestial Dragon. And that's why Shanks and Shamrock are polar opposites, and Dragon would be the perfect one to reveal this. We then see Dragon's face, his first obstacle being the Celestial Dragon Holy Knight Maffy, who's using a Pacifista-like bomb to hit his shoulders, reminding me of Kuma's Pacifista days. But also Dragon saying we don't move until they immobilize the Holy Knights, knowing that they're the true threat rather than the Marines who are being influenced. Yes, that's right. God Valley is definitely a huge influence on Dragon's decision currently in the One Piece story. This would lead to Dragon revealing the twins were his only way of atoning for setting up this twisted murder game, as he even believes he deserves to die for what took place on God Valley, as Whitebeard comes out of nowhere to save him. I believe Luffy saving Whitebeard from Crocodile was kind of like a homage to the moment on God Valley, as Dragon sees Big Mom and Whitebeard as huge pirates, which in my opinion is a reference to Dragon reaching their power level in the current story. Just look at how strong Sabo is, and also the fact that his son would be on the monsters levels as a current Yako. Dragon might honestly be above Big Mom and Whitebeard at the pre-time skip power level that they're at. But again, Dragon would be in his prime too as well, compared to Whitebeard and old Big Mom. Also, Oda highlighted Dragon having the chance to escape through all the commotion, but was still focused on the twins as he finds Shanks knocked out cold. This is an obvious reference to Dragon Ball. As we know, Oda was inspired by the late great Toriyama, and Goku hit his head and became a good Samaritan when he came to Earth as a child, showing why there is a contrast between Shanks and the evil Shamrock. Now I must admit, I never thought the first interaction between Dragon and Garp would be him. Yes, him, Garp chasing 3 future Yonko while also tanking Big Mom's attack. Now you see why I called Garp him. He is him. I believe Oda did this to show how much Dragon idolized his father and how everything changed after the God Valley incident. If anything, Dragon before God Valley was like Kobe. And that's no offense to Kobe, because we see Kobe climbing the ranks of the Marines. Yes, that's right. If Dragon never left the Marines, he would have ended up like Kobe with that insane honesty impact and many more future powerful attacks he develops as his goal is to become an admiral. I truly believe Dragon still does have influence from his father Garp. I still think he uses the battleship bags training on his own as a homage to how he wants to surpass his father. Remember the phrase, idols become rivals, and expect Dragon to repay the favor of being freed from prison after the Elbaf arc. Yes, I would love to see Dragon go to Pirate Island and free Garp. I appreciate Dragon apologizing to Shanks for not saving Shamrock, because he knows this will turn Shamrock evil, just like his father Garling and the rest of the Celestial Dragons, as Dragon knows they will never truly share that brotherhood again. As we saw when Shanks returned to the Holy Land and was disgusted from what he saw and chose to return to the Blue Sea, I also want to highlight Oda making Blackbeard's mom and Dragon saying I want you to die to Blackbeard and Shanks as a parallel, as we know they clashed as youngins, and that's how Shanks got his scar, and they almost fought on Marineford when Blackbeard said it was too early, and now they'll most likely fight on Elbaf or after Elbaf. As we even saw Shanks waiting at Wano for Blackbeard and was trying to gather info on Blackbeard during the Egghead Island arc. So yeah, Dragon is responsible for one of the greatest fights in One Piece that will happen very soon. And the Celestial Dragons versus the Willy D, where surprisingly we will be rooting for the Celestial Dragon to win. We then see Oda's genius once more, as he has Dragon almost at the Navy ship where Shanks potentially becomes a Marine, but Captain John, the man with the magnet delve through, yes, the same power that belonged to Kid, who Eustace Kid has had a magnet pull towards Shanks since the time skip where he lost his arm to Shanks' vice captain Ben Beckman, yes, the right-hand man, and now the same Kid that, of course, Shanks was about to get his whole fleet destroyed by Dan Punk, and then, of course, Red Hair used his divine departure to one-shot him. This Captain John moment during God Valley did not only tie into the future, but also is a main reason for Shanks being a pirate, as he is found by Roger and the Roger Pirates on the Ora Jackson in a treasure chest because of the Big Eater attack. We then see the frustration build in Dragon from not being able to save one baby to putting a gun to the unknown Vice Admiral who refused to save the survivors and stated he would kill anybody who didn't listen to him. As we see this unknown Vice Admiral warn Dragon, this won't end well, as Dragon would be locked up for this action trying to save survivors. Talk about insanity, as he was the polar opposite of Akainu who would crash out on survivors on the off chance that the mission wasn't complete. And we know Oda is cooking something nice here, and Akainu, the fleet admiral, obsession with the most wanted man, Monkey D. Dragon. As we saw during Marineford, he kept calling Luffy Dragon's son. But this is how I want to end this video. We know Dragon, after hearing Vegapunk's message, is motivated to take action. Probably the most patient man alive, who waited 38 years for this moment, as he now hurries to achieve victory over Imu. The reason why Dragon is taking action now is because he wants to take action and win before the world destroys each other, fighting for land as it sinks to the ocean. The fact that Lafitte is watching the revolutionaries starve the Celestial Dragons and now the Holy Land is on fire, Blackbeard and Dragon might both go against the world at the same time, like their father Rox and Garp. But don't forget Shanks, who is hunting Blackbeard, and his family who works for Imu, but his real father figure was Roger, as you see me tying into the fact that Roger, Rox, and Garp were the pivotal characters on God Valley. These three sons will now take on the world like their fathers did at God Valley. And I believe it's pretty ironic how they were also present. Yes, the sons were actually there during God Valley, but they weren't the men they are today. And might I add, I believe Dragon will have a special power tied to the Void Century, and maybe even hockey based on his tattoo. Or it could even be connected to a legendary Delphi, which I believe will have Imu severely damaged before his fight with Luffy. But when Dragon does meet Luffy, the fans will have to admit we were wrong about Monkey D. Dragon. His love for Luffy led him to be absent in Luffy's life, as Dragon taking on the world was truly for Luffy and the rest of the world. So I'm hyped to see what Dragon will do, but I already have a lot of speculations, and I believe Oda really did a great job with Dragon. This is how you develop a character in a flashback, while also not making them the main character of the flashback. I loved it, Oda.